I think that at the end of the day, it's very apparent that she was ducking Chris Cyborg in the PFL. I don't know anyone that would pour in that much
Wow.
money to one specific person like Dawn Davis to have her as the face of his brand, and then only for her to not forego her contract at the PFL. She was running from Chris Cyborg. Everybody knows that. And of course, because
She
she had
came
such a
right
big
out
name
the
there,
gate.
she was able to jump the line in front of all these other women that had put in so much time and effort into making this bantamweight division great. So do I understand it? Of course. The machine is a moneymaker. If it don't make money, it don't make sense. And at the end of the day, this fight makes sense, and that's why it's being done.
All right, y'all. So, yeah, Julianna Pena is going in again. She's doing what she do best, right? She's she's styling on him. She's styling on Kayla Harrison once again. But yeah, man. I had just got around to watching this whole press conference. Like I watched a little bit of it last week when I was driving, listening to, the whole thing, just listening to Marab and O'Malley as well. But I just wanted to jump back on here and talk about Julianna Pena and Kayla Harrison as far as their exchange and just, about Julianna Pena's approach right now. Like, once again, as far as like her promotion, as far as for herself and just for WMMA, you got to give her credit, man, because when she jumps on the mic, she's gonna talk, man. She's gonna talk and she's gonna rub people the wrong way, and she plays the villain well. She plays the villain well. That's what you got to do, right? But the real question is this the only time Julianna Pena is really going to get a 10-9 or 10-8, if you want to consider it a 10-8 on Kayla Harrison? Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, this is the only time Kayla Harrison is going to get stunted on. Everybody thinks that at this point, it's going to be a dominant fight. But who knows? Who knows, right? Who really knows what could happen? It's the world of MMA. But yeah, Julianna Pena, man, she wasn't holding back in this one, man. I mean, she was going in. It was like she had all of this pent up from, I don't know, when Kayla Harrison was back in PFL back in 2020 or 2019 or whatever, right? She was talking about everything. First off, I mean, Julianna Pena brought up Kayla Harrison ducking Chris Cyborg. She just started right off and say she ducked Chris Cyborg. She jumped the line. She jumped the line and got, the royal treatment over all the other hardworking bantamweights and was able to get a title shot just like that. And I mean, I do agree with her on the Chris Cyborg thing. I talked about that a while ago. I was like, why did she avoid that fight? At the time she was looking for competition. And when Chris Cyborg came over, everybody was like, okay, that's the fight to make. But as soon as she came, it was just like, why did you leave at that point? That was kind of suspect. Like, why would you leave when you got a legend now in your presence, right? Even if you're going to do just one fight, why not just go ahead and fight her? Why not fight her? And on top of that, you would have been fighting her at a safe weight, because I'm sure Don Davis, they would have been cool with letting Kayla call the shots on what weight was safer for her. It wouldn't have been 135, right? It wouldn't have been 135. So number one, she would have got to fight Chris Cyborg at 155 or 145 or somewhere in the area that's good for her, So that just kind of shows me at the time, I think managers and, fighters aside and everybody in her corner is probably like, that's a little too much for her, and that's just being real. To me, I knew it was too much, but, they're going to sugarcoat it a little bit to the fans and make it seem like, okay, let's just go into the UFC for the better fighters. But you got one of the best fighters right here in front of you in your organization. So I do agree with Julianna Pena on that. But as far as jumping the line, I think all Kayla needed was 2 fights at this point, because when you look at the bantamweight division at the time when she was coming in, it was kind of dry, right? I mean, you got a lot of girls coming in now, like, of course, coming up like Jacqueline Cavalcanti and Norma Dumont. But at the time, when Kayla was coming in like a couple years ago, fighting like Holly Holm and Ketlin Vieira, that was good. Go ahead and get 2 fights in. But other than that, some of the other girls were injured. Macy Chiasson hasn't really been consistent because of injuries. And some of the other girls, like I said, they're just older or being injured. Holly was injured for a while. Shoot, champion Julianna Pena was injured, So I think that it needed a fighter like Kayla Harrison, who was going to come over to PFL and risk moving down to say, let me put in a couple fights and then challenge for the belt, right? Because WMMA as a whole isn't that popular, right? So in order to build the division back, they need somebody that can carry some of that weight. So you do need that, right? And Julianna Pena also, went in on the weight cut. She brought up the fact that Kayla Harrison was, peeing blood, having a rough, just a rough time making 135. And that's another thing that I agree with her on. I talked about that a couple of videos ago, about how long before Kayla Harrison says enough when it comes to 135. She said it herself, right? She said it herself as far as going to the ER a little while back on Ariel Hawani's show. There were some other interviews here where Kayla had talked about how hard it is to make 135. And, we're talking about a fighter that's walking around, like I said, 160, 170, maybe solid muscle. And I'm looking right here, MMA Junkie, this article from 2 weeks ago. Kayla Harris admits cutting down to 135 is torture, and it's definitely not healthy, right? Let me see here. She had said it's torture, but everything I wanted is on the other side of that torture. I feel like I've become refined in the fire. It's a very lonely process. It's a much harder mental grind than I expected. First, it was like this fear of, can I do this? And if this fear is of, I know what I have to do in order to do this. It's definitely not healthy. Don't do this, kids. I do not recommend it. My team is so dialed in and I know what I have to do. It's not easy, but I do believe in it. In the end, it'll be worth it. And we do it in as healthy and as safe a manner as possible. All right. So yeah, like I said, that right there just lets you know that this is an easy walk for her. And like I said, Julianna Pena, her calling attention to that and putting it out there is just, her way of playing that mental game, and at the same time with her bringing that up, it might trigger some things with Julianna. It might trigger some things with Kayla Harrison to make her say, oh, maybe I need to rethink some things. But I think she's pretty strong mentally when it comes to actually wanting to fight in competition. That's why she's doing it. It will have a bad downfall for Kayla the longer she does this, but I think at this point it doesn't really affect her when Julianna Pena brings it up. I mean, it's all true though. It is all true. She is torturing herself to make weight though, right? But as far as her bringing up how Kayla Harrison's going to beat her, just kind of bringing that up, and the dog in her, how Amanda Nunes couldn't even beat her, since Amanda Nunes was sitting, right there close to the front row or just sitting in the audience. That just makes me ask some other questions too, like how is Julianna Pena going to beat Kayla herself? Like, does Julianna Pena have the stopping power? Like, does she have the technique at this point in her career? Because another interview I was listening to where Kayla Harrison was talking about Julianna Pena's style, she was like, yeah, she's tough, but she fights dumb. She called her dumb at one point. And I've said that before. I've said that before. Julianna Pena is one tough girl, but man, she'll abandon technique and just fight like a reckless fighter in there sometimes. It's like a brawler sometimes, and she leaves herself wide open for these knockouts or submissions. So, that's a question I have to ask. Like, how does Julianna Pena beat her? How does Julianna Pena beat her? I think Kayla, of course, has the strength and that overall grappling, to get on the inside. If Julianna Pena doesn't go outside of the box and stick to technique and use more angles and side to side movement, and she just makes beelines in, then that makes it easy for Kayla to get the fight to the ground and get the finish. Because again, as heavy as Kayla is probably going to weigh on fight night, that's a lot of power coming down from them elbows. Kayla's just not going to lay and pray. Kayla's going to come to fight. So I think that's one way I see how Kayla Harrison is going to take Julianna Pena. That strength is going to be much more than like fighters like even like Valentina had to submit Pena before. That was just a mixture of a lot of recklessness in there. But with Kayla being so much bigger, I think, yeah, she probably will be able to overpower her. Unless Pena is able to keep this fight on the feet, it's not going any different, But after listening to this interview too, just kind of looking at Dana White and listening to the audience reaction every time, like Julianna Pena would bring up Amanda Nunes, how they booed her, man. I was like, man, I just know now that Amanda Nunes is there in the audience, like you can see like Dana White's face and just like the crowd's reaction that Pena's stock is going down. Like Pena's trying, she's trying to be that heel and speak come in there with the mic skills and just speak some truth at the same time, you know, ruffle some feathers, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough because Kayla's like this next coming to Ronda, and they really want to build up somebody like Ronda. They want to build up another Ronda right now, and with Amanda sitting right there, another fighter that everybody favors over Pena, they're all hoping that Julianna Pena just falls in this thing, So it's actually good promotion for Amanda's comeback. That's why she came there. And that's what I was saying. A lot of people feel like Amanda's just training and not coming back. Nah, I think Amanda truly is coming back, which she says she is. I don't think she would show up here and try to size both of these fighters up and just see their reaction to her being there without it really meaning something, So yeah, I definitely think Amanda's coming back, but I think that's even more fuel to the fire for both of these ladies to put on a good fight. I think a lot of people are counting these two out. They think it's going to be a boring fight. Some people saying this is a bad co-main event. I'm like, where at? Like, where at? I mean, we've had some bad men's fights in the past, bad co-main events. So how can you really how can you judge and say like it's going to be a bad fight when Kayla's stopping girls and Julianna Pena is an exciting fighter, win or lose, and then on top of that, they don't like each other. So that's going to make for a good fight. Like, they're not going to go in there respecting each other. There's a lot riding on this thing for both of them. And I think, with that, Kayla's going to come in wanting to thrash Pena, and likewise, because Pena knows that if she wins this fight, which is going to be hard to do, she'll be granted that rubber match. And even though she did get stoppage over Nunes, 1-1 still rubs her just like it probably does Nunes, and they want to end that tie. But for Kayla, apparently, according to Pena, Nunes dislikes Kayla more. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, she says Nunes dislikes Kayla a little bit more. So even that fight adds a lot of fire to the bantamweight division. So yeah, Amanda Nunes is needed in the bantamweight division, but overall, a fight between Pena and Harrison definitely doesn't take away from the bantamweight division. It's in need of fire like this right now. And I think, again, with a talker like Julianna Pena and, a new head like Kayla, who we want to see go in there and answer some more questions on like how good she really is, even though she beat Holly and Ketlin, which ain't saying much. We need to see what she's capable of. We need to see what she's capable of. And that's another thing too, man. Like, she was going in, man. She was like, she beat a bunch of grandmas and her resume is nothing. And I mean, like I said, Pena's not lying about a lot of stuff. Pena's making people mad because, she's saying some of the truthful things, and it rubs people the wrong way. Because even when I'm doing a resume check on Kayla, I'm like, all right, even in PFL, I need to see something. I need to see something. I mean, I show her respect now because she's fighting different and she's adding more to her game. But even then, when you look at resume, you be like, okay, Julianna Pena's fought some tough girls on her level, GDR, Kat Zingano, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko. She's fought some of the toughest fighters, whereas Kayla, I'd say Marina Mahotnica was one of the toughest at the time, like a few years ago. Then Larissa Pacheco, of course, but are they UFC level? She's beat Aspen Ladd, yeah, but, Pena still has more ground to stand on as far as being tested, So I will give Kayla credit. Yeah, if she does beat Julianna Pena and she does it in dominant fashion, So yeah, yeah, I think this is going to be a good fight, man. I think it really is. I just wonder, is Julianna Pena getting a little skittish? Is she trying to Well, I think she believes in herself. I do. That's one thing about her. Like, she'll put everything else aside and she'll just start talking trash, but she'll come to fight. That's the one thing about her. She will come to fight. And I like her little comebacks too. She was like, oh, your belt's over at PFL. She's like, your belt's over at PFL. And even whenever Kayla talked about fighting Amanda, she was like, yeah, it won't be for the belt. She was just like making them little cracks there because she knows that Dana is he's already salivating, man. He's already drooling over a Kayla Nunes fight. And I think that's the fight everybody wants. But to me, however this thing goes, I just want a good fight. I mean, a third fight with Nunes and Pena, I know it would bring some blood and action, but I would love to see a new a new take here. A comeback of the champion versus this behind the scenes beef between her and Kayla. Like this, there's some other things going on there, which I'm gonna talk about in another video here because I've seen some other things that Amanda Nunes put out there about Kayla. But yeah, what did y'all think, man? Like Kayla again, I think she just really she's just ready to fight. I think she's just really mad at Pena. She wanted to go in there and destroy her, but we'll see. Julianna Pena again, she was styling on Harrison. So I give her 10-9 on this one, maybe even a 10-8. Because Kayla said she wasn't even prepared for that. She was just like, I thought we was going to talk. I thought we were just going to talk some trash. But she was like, she came out with everything prepared. She was like, I didn't come out with no one-liners and nothing written. She was just like, I just came out, which I know that Julianna Pena probably wasn't writing anything down. Julianna Pena was just freestyling because that's how she do. But yeah, this is what Kayla said in this interview here. She was like, I'm still trying to figure out what happened. It was a lot. I thought we were just going to go in there and talk a little bit of trash. I was expecting us to have a little bit of fun with it, but she came out swinging. And I was like, it kind of works in my favor because she talks so much that everybody just hates her. So I win a lot of fans. And when I'm just like, all right, whatever. She was talking about Chris Cyborg, running, grandmas, skinny, bloody, walking tacos. And I was like, what's happening right now? So she said, we'll see. So yeah, she said she didn't have no material prepared. So, but that's what Julianna Pena does, y'all. That's what she does. So should be a good fight, y'all. We'll talk some more about this a little bit later. What do y'all think Julianna Pena's plan is, though? Does this get in the mind of Kayla? Let me know in the comment section. Hit the like and subscribe. I'm out. Peace.